This video is being made with the highest importance in mind for those of you who have finished 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'd like to report that I have been in quarantine so long that I am approaching castaway levels of beard growth. For future generations that are watching this, please know that it was not possible to see a barber, and trimming a beard of this length by yourself is a daunting task. So that's why we're more beard than head. Anyways, that being said, this video is for people who watched 2001. If you didn't watch 2001, you can watch this if you want, but I don't think you should, because it's for people who have watched it, thought about the questions. As far as those questions go, I was interested in you struggling to answer them as best you can. If you didn't get them right, that was actually okay, because I was looking for like your thought. I was looking for you to engage with a difficult text or movie, as it were. And just having the answer and just Googling the answer doesn't teach you anything. So that being said, me telling you the end after you've struggled with it, I think does. Not that I'm better than the internet. I guess it didn't come out right. But what I want to do is just kind of explain a couple things. So first of all, you've got this TMA thing, which is referred to as the monolith. It's the giant 13-foot unearthly material, black, whatever. It's not obsidian because it's not earthly material. If you read the book, you get insight that you don't get in the movie. If you watch the movie, you get insight you don't get in the book. They are kind of companion pieces, and they are still meant to be experienced, not understood. But the book does explain a couple things. So first thing you have early in the movie, you got this ape whose name is Moonwatcher, actually, who is afraid of the cheetah. He's running around the savannah. He gets scared off by the bigger, louder apes and whatever. Middle of the night, this thing shows up. They hesitate and they touch it. When they touch it, it sends out this pulse. They are affected by the pulse. They level up. Like, I wanted you to think about this movie like video game level of leveling up, you know, the way you get the mushroom and you turn into Big Mario or whatever. That's what happened with the apes. They figured out, hey, these slow moving animals around us, they're probably delicious. And when they eat them, their brains grow, they make weapons, they make tools, they figure out all kinds of things, and they drive the other apes away. And then he throws it up into the air. And what it's supposed to show is like the beginning, it's the dawn of man, it's the beginning of time, and it's man becoming what we are now, because it fast forward from primitive millions of years ago to the year 1996, which is what it is in the book. And he throws that bone up into the air, which is a very famous shot, and the bone like spins, and then it like matches with one of the satellites. And what you're supposed to know is that the satellites are filled with this deadly cargo, nuclear warheads, because we've graduated to a much deadlier stick, right? Where we see the first murder where he thumps the guy in the back and then beats him with the bone. It's okay if you laughed when you watch that. That's what most classes do, but whatever. So that happens. We fast forward to 1996. We have figured out space travel. We have figured out how to get to the moon, and we found another one of these things on the moon. Meanwhile, you have this long part, which maybe you watch and fast forward or whatever, which is the part people came for. People wanted to see, like, what's it going to be like to fly upside down and with zero gravity and to the moon and whatever. All of that is done with camera tricks and whatever, and you should watch it behind the scenes because it's brilliant the way that they did that. That being said, they go on to the moon. They're like, I don't know what it is, but it was intentionally buried 4 million years ago. And this is the part of that question that I had proposed for you. Like, why does this movie have aliens in it, but never show the aliens? Because it's implied that somebody did this. And what I think of it is like getting into the idea of like infinite bigness, infinite smallness. Have you ever tried to communicate with ants? Think of it that way. If you haven't, well, the ants are there, and maybe there's a way to communicate with them, not unlike the movie Ant-Man or whatever, but maybe there are things so colossal and big and intelligent that we're like the ants. As advanced as we think we are pretty primitive, because we are not beings of light and power and whatever, and we have not figured out how to leave our planet for very long, where other things probably have. So that being said, these beings that are able to do that, they put these like calling cards throughout the galaxy. And if you're able to figure out how to touch one, it'll level you up, and maybe you can get to the next one. And maybe after a couple more million years, you'll figure out how to follow the breadcrumbs through space and meet us. And what happens on the moon, they find another one, they touch it, it sends out a pulse. It is also pointed at Jupiter. Humanity levels up. We create artificial intelligence. We create the big spaceship, and we fly out there. And in the midst of doing that, we have some human error that causes HAL to go bad. I know it's easy to think of the HAL 9000 as being the bad guy, Hal is not the bad guy any more than Otto or any of the robots in Wall-E are just doing what they're programmed to do. If there is a flaw, it was human error. And the fact that maybe they made him a little bit too human to have the choice to do what he's going to do. I'm talking about Hal here, in that the choices that he made by being programmed by a human caused him to make a human error, which is to kill the entire crew, fearing that they were going to jeopardize the mission and taking it too far, as opposed to figuring out a way to think ahead of them. You can actually see the glitch that's going to happen if you play any chess, which I don't play a lot of chess. And I'll be honest, I read about this one, but he makes a bad chess move, even though he still beats Frank. He makes a bad chess move, and Frank even says, "What a lousy move." And you can kind of see, like, maybe he's glitching a little bit, the fact that this supercomputer made this bad chess move against a guy who's a mediocre chess player. Anyways, so that happens. They touch the thing. They fly out to Saturn. You see what happens where he, like Hal, I keep saying it sends him out into space. Dave has to, in which I think is a really great scene, get back in to the ship, powers Hal down, goes out in the probe. He gets the news about like what's going on. He goes into the monolith, and this is like the TMA-3, the third monolith. And this is what happens here. He goes into this, and in the book, there's this part where like his last line of conscious dialogue is, "It's full of stars," because he flies into it and it like turns like a doorway, and he goes into it, and it's like this gateway that he goes into. And basically he dies and is reborn as a star child. And just like any, thing you need to go through adolescence and childhood and adulthood, and to get to elderly age, and like whatever levels you need to go through in your development as a human and mentally, physically, whatever, like you go through those and you're not the same afterwards. Just like Dave goes into the monolith and he is leveled up. He is like given this like rapid fire information in that color and light. And he goes from being this physical, faulty, fragile human thing to something else. And what happens when he regains consciousness is he's in this 14th century French room, which it's hypothesized that the aliens didn't know exactly what he would like. So they kind of made him a room that they thought would be what a human would like. And basically he has no concept of time. And he's kind of in this zoo where he ages and he has to die. And he has to realize that he is leveling up and consciously do that because he's not a physical body anymore. He's a man, and then becomes a older man, then he becomes an elderly man, then he becomes a dying man. And then he sees the fourth monolith in the movie and he reaches out to it. And that's when he becomes what he's been leveled up to be, which is a star child. This like baby in space, which I know maybe you're like, what? When you got to the end of the movie, he is this star child that is like whatever he thinks he can do. He's kind of like a very primitive Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen or Superman or whatever you want to call it. He is like a god, not the god, although they definitely imply it, the idea of like deities and whatever and that kind of thing and higher powers. And it's all very sacrilegious if you are offended by that kind of thing. But I think it's a good scientific idea. And basically like in the book, people send nuclear warheads out to him, and Dave just says like, no, I don't think so. And like, they just kind of like poof in an, puff of smoke that's like, doesn't matter or whatever. And he just says, like thinks to himself, like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I bet I'll figure something out. And then there's 3 books after that where he travels the galaxy and like gets bored with humanity and whatever. Not unlike, Dr. Manhattan. So that being said, here's a question for you. What if the HAL 9000 had succeeded and killed off all the humans, and HAL had gone through the last portal? Would he have leveled up? Would his consciousness, would its consciousness have leveled up into some sort of body, some sort of like, would it have recognized itself as a thing? Would it have, I know the glowing light is the thing we recognize as its body, but HAL is everywhere. HAL is all over the ship. He's not the ship, but he's like the nervous system of the ship. So what would he see himself as? Would he see himself as a man? Would he see himself as a robot? Would he see himself as a glowing light? Or would he not take a physical body and he would just be like this mental entity? And there was an interesting film that I never got around to watching that was the original 2001, edited down to about a 90-minute movie where HAL makes it instead of Dave and any other humans or anything like that. And I don't know what the reaction was to that because they took it down for copyright, and maybe it'll float back up one day. But the other thing I want to mention is the movie itself, and this is one of the things that, Kubrick was very coy in some ways about telling you what his movie was about, because it was meant to be experienced and not to be understood. And I'll talk about that in a moment too. But one thing that I think of is when you think about the movie and when you think about looking at the movie, think about what the screen looks like. All right. The screen you're looking at right now is filling out like your whole Chromebook, or if you turn your phone sideways, it's filling out the entire screen. And when you think about that, like the monolith looks like this shape, right? And I don't think that Kubrick was anticipating phones or anything like that, but he did make a movie. And when you look at especially because he shot it in 70 millimeter, when you think of the shape of that screen and how it would have the black lines along the top and the bottom, because it would be a wider stance or whatever. Really what he's doing is, this is kind of like, if you're watching it on this, if you're watching it right here, then this is the information, like this is the monolith basically leveling you up. Stanley Kubrick is hiding this in plain sight, that you're being leveled up without you knowing it by watching his movie. The information that Dave would have gotten instantaneously is the information that you got over 2.5 hours of watching that movie. So whether you like it or not, you leveled up. However, much like Dave in the zoo, who is trapped there for eternity without him knowing how much time is going by, until he consciously realized that he has received the information and can make any kind of sense out of it to mature and level up and evolve, you too will be stuck with whatever it is you know about 2001 until you figure out how to level up. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is, I know when I thought of that and read some of those things, like, yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, like, I mentioned in my earlier video that people didn't like this movie. Not everybody didn't like it. Critics loved it. Art people loved it. And there were plenty of people who just maybe didn't have a venue to talk about how much they loved it. But one of the groups that really kept this movie alive was, it's 1968. We've got people experimenting with all kinds of different substances and, acid and different drugs, which of course are completely prohibited. But there are definitely scientists who are looking into microdosing and that kind of thing. And like don't take it from me, go read about it, and don't just get it from Joe Rogan. Like, get it from a real scientist of like what that is and what it could do. And in 1968, the government is experimenting with it. People are experimenting with it, and people are smoking pot and taking other drugs. But the counterculture, and there were definitely people who would take something and they would go experience this movie. And who's to say what they experienced was any more right or wrong than what anybody else did? If you're completely stone sober watching 2001 and you're altered on some sort of chemical or whatever, and you watched it, and I'm in no way encouraging this, I'm just saying, like, this is what happened. And this is definitely a legendary thing about this movie, that people would do that, or they would do something, take something at the intermission, and then that second half when the lights hit, those people probably got a completely different show than some others. So, that is one of the things that I don't think it would be beyond Kubrick to suggest that maybe you need to level up in some ways before you experience this movie. I mean, you can just watch it any other way, but, just like being stuck in that zoo or the pulse hitting you and you not doing anything about it, you're just not going to get anything out of it. So those are some thoughts on 2001. If you're intrigued by it, if it's puzzling, if it still doesn't make any sense, do what I do. Take some time, be angry about it, think that it's stupid, and everybody else who thinks it's smart is a stupid thing. But then come back to it. One day you'll be like, this is a 50-some-year-old movie and people are still talking about it and I don't get it. I'm probably not the one that's right by saying that it's not a good, important movie. Come back to it. Same thing with Interstellar. Same thing with Blade Runner. Same thing with anything that you don't understand that has survived for a long time. So I hope this helped you understand 2001 a little bit better.